Are any of the portable projectors that are available in October of 2025 worth buying? Let's find out. In the first test, we'll see which projector has the brightest picture and the best contrast. Then we'll do head-to-head picture quality testing on 100-inch screens. Then we'll test their battery life. After that, we'll see which projector has the loudest and highest quality speakers and the quietest fans. We'll look at their focus, Keystone, and aiming solutions. For gamers, we'll test input lag, and last, we'll test their built-in smart operating system performance and app compatibility. But first, to be able to do a strictly portable projector review, I needed a clear definition of what makes a projector portable. So for this video, all of the projectors needed to have either a built-in battery, like the Dangbei Frito, XGIMI MOGO 4, XGIMI MOGO 4 Laser, BENQ GV50, TCL Playcube, and the Nebula Mars 3, or they had to be able to be powered by a USB-C battery bank, like the JMGO PicoPlay, Wemax S5, Nexigo Nova Mini, and Epson Life Studio Plus. And we'll start out with brightness testing, which is by far the most important aspect of a portable projector, but it's also the one that you can basically never trust when looking at manufacturer claims. And unfortunately, the maximum advertised brightness will almost always be in a mode that you would never want to use. But I started my testing by verifying their brightness claims, and here are the advertised lumens of each projector compared to what I was able to measure. And you can see that the only projectors that were even remotely usable in their brightest modes were the Nexigo Nova Mini, Epson Life Studio Flex Plus, BENQ GV50, and Wemax S5. And the rest had unacceptable compromises in fan noise, color accuracy, or both. So next, I measured what I call their highest usable brightness, which I define as having no compromises in fan noise and color accuracy delta errors under 10. And while the Epson came out on top here, the most interesting result to me was that the XGIMI MOGO 4, which is advertised at 450 maximum lumens, was slightly brighter than the more expensive XGIMI MOGO 4 Laser, which is supposed to have 550 max lumens, but from a usable brightness standpoint, there's basically no difference between them. And last, I measured what I called their accurate lumens, which is what you would want to use when watching movies that has a higher color accuracy and a warmer white balance. And while the Epson Life Studio Flex Plus still came out on top, the Nexigo Nova Mini was not far behind. And the next most important thing in terms of picture quality is the projector's contrast. And I calculated this by measuring the brightness at the center of an all-white screen, and then I compared that to an all-black screen with a moving white square that just prevents these projector companies from turning the light source all the way off to game the system. And looking at native contrast first, the XGIMI Laser, BENQ GV50, and Wemax S5 were all very respectable with black floors under 0.2 lux, but the Nexigo and Epson both have dynamic dimming, which can lower the power of the light source in darker scenes, significantly increasing their contrast to more than double the best native contrast values. However, how well a dynamic dimming system works is impossible to know without watching real content, so next I put each projector head-to-head on 100-inch screens, starting out with the two least expensive projectors, the $349 JMGO PicoPlay on the left and the $439 Dangbei Frito on the right. And having come from just reviewing 2,000 to 3,000 lumen projectors, both of these looked incredibly dim to me, which tends to cause them to look flat and uninteresting even in bright scenes. And you can also see that neither projector was particularly color accurate, with the JMGO leaning much more towards blue and the Dangbei looks pretty green. In moderately lit scenes, the Dangbei's extra brightness does help highlights stand out and results in a more interesting image, but in the darkest scenes, the JMGO showed more shadow detail due to its higher contrast ratio and lower black floor. And while neither of these projectors seemed great to me, I think most people would appreciate the extra brightness of the Dangbei over the increased contrast of the JMGO, so the Dangbei moves on. And that makes round two the $499 XGIMI MOGO 4 on the left and the $439 Dangbei Frito on the right. And while there was only a small difference in their brightness, the Dangbei looked much more vibrant in bright content like golf and football. And all of the colors on the XGIMI MOGO 4 looked muted in comparison. In moderately lit content, both projectors were nearly equal, except for the XGIMI being a little bit shifted towards blue and the Dangbei shifted towards green. But the second any highlights showed up on the screen, the Dangbei was noticeably better, and neither of these projectors handled dark content well. So this round was an easy win for the Dangbei. And that makes round three the $519 Wemax S5 on the left against the $439 Dangbei Frito on the right. And when I first turned on the Wemax, the image processing made the grass at Bethpage look neon in some areas and nearly black in other areas. And the same was true for the artificial turf in Montana Stadium. And Danny's skin in Gemini Man looked like she was a burn victim. But thankfully I was able to go and raise the brightness and contrast, reduce the saturation, and set the sharpness to 0, and that made the resulting image much more reasonable. Though the overall color accuracy on the Wemax was still pretty bad. However, brightness and contrast are so important to the overall picture quality, and despite some occasional weirdness in color, the Wemax S5 had much more depth and vibrance than the Dangbei Frito in bright scenes, and significantly more shadow detail and sharpness in dark scenes. And overall, I thought the Wemax easily earned a win here. So in round 4, the $519 Wemax S5 is on the left, and the $679 XGIMI Mogo 4 laser is on the right. And if we start with a moderately dark scene like in Wakanda Forever, the XGIMI looks very convincing with deep, eye-catching colors compared to the Wemax. But unfortunately, that is not what these colors are supposed to look like, and the XGIMI is using colors way outside of the intended color space. And that does look pretty cool in explosions and in the paint of cars, but it can really mess with skin tones of all types, and the bright scenes in Gemini Man were a mess, and I couldn't find any settings on the XGIMI that would force it to use the color space defined by the content. And that's a shame because overall I really enjoyed the contrast of the XGIMI Mogo 4 laser, and using lasers can give you a much wider color space coverage if it's done properly. But to me, the colors on the XGIMI Mogo 4 laser just looked way too off for me to send it on, and the Wemax S5 moved on instead. And that means that in round 5, the $519 Wemax S5 is on the left, and the $699 Nexigo Nova Mini is on the right. And with the Nexigo having nearly double the brightness of the Wemax, this was testing the limits of what my camera could properly capture. So you will just have to take my word for it that the Nexigo wasn't blowing out highlights in person, but if I exposed for the Nexigo, the Wemax was barely visible. And in basically every scene, the difference in picture quality was staggering. But the shadow detail and highlights in the darkest scenes were comparatively incredible on the Nexigo, thanks to its Scene Adapt Engine dynamic contrast system. And moderately lit scenes were vibrant and punchy without being oversaturated. And when watching bright content like college football, everything had much more detail and perceived depth. And on the golf course, it looked like an actual sunny day on the Nexigo versus an overcast day on the Wemax. And this was the most decisive victory so far, and the Nexigo easily won this round. So round 6 then puts the $699 BENQ GV50 on the left up against the $699 Nexigo Nova Mini on the right. And if these were strictly home theater projectors, I might deduct some points from the Nexigo for doing such aggressive gamma manipulation, which results in an overall brighter picture with more detail in the midtones. But for a portable projector with limited brightness, this is exactly how tone mapping should be handled. And while the GV50 was extremely color accurate, especially in bright scenes, I think people would choose the image from the Nexigo 9 out of 10 times. And just for fun, I also compared the vibrant setting on both projectors for watching sports, and again, I can't really fault the GV50's image at all. It looks really good for a 325 lumen projector, but the Nexigo has double that brightness, dynamic dimming, and excellent image processing, which made it the clear choice for a projector that's ultimately designed for temporary setups. So next in round 7, the $699 TCL PlayCube is on the left, and the $699 Nexigo Nova Mini is on the right. And while the TCL has an option to enable dynamic contrast in its settings, from what I could tell it only works on completely black screens, like in between the names and credits and when loading apps like Netflix. And while the PlayCube was substantially brighter than the BENQ GV50 from the last round, the color accuracy and contrast were not as strong. And while I thought bright scenes looked a little bit better on the TCL, with Danny's skin being a little undersaturated and Henry's being a little oversaturated on the Nexigo, moderately lit scenes significantly favored the Nexigo, and the darkest scenes were absolutely no contest. And with projectors, you can get away with poor tone mapping if you have excellent contrast, and you can make up for poor contrast with great tone mapping. But unfortunately, the TCL lacks both of those and lost a ton of shadow detail, and while the Nexigo wasn't perfect and it had some brief color shifts, it was in a whole different league than the TCL, and the Nexigo was the clear winner in this round also. So that makes round 8 the $799 Nebula Mars 3 on the left versus the $699 Nexigo Nova Mini on the right. And this is actually the third year that the Nebula has been in this portable projector video, not only due to its rugged form factor and huge internal battery, but I also just love the tone mapping in dark and moderate scenes, which again, for a portable projector, is just going to make the image so much more watchable in imperfect conditions. However, you can see that the Nexigo Nova Mini just takes that aggressive tone mapping and adds double the native contrast and dynamic laser dimming to the equation. And there were some scenes where there wasn't too much of a difference between the two projectors, but when the Nexigo is using all of its tricks, the choice is obvious. And again, the Nexigo easily took this round. So then in the final round, the $999 Epson Life Studio Flex Plus is on the left, and the $699 Nexigo Nova Mini is on the right. And even though the Nexigo has 200 more advertised lumens, both the usable and color accurate lumens on the Epson are higher. And in bright scenes, the Epson was slightly more color accurate despite being a little oversaturated, but the biggest difference to me was how flat the Epson looked when compared to the Nexigo, which was surprising because they both have essentially the same native contrast ratio and they both have dynamic contrast enabled. But as I mentioned, not all dynamic contrast systems are created equal, and the Nexigo absolutely dominated the Epson in dark scenes and in moderately lit scenes, and even the brightest content favored the Nexigo with the higher contrast, leading to greater perceived depth and sharpness. So after all that and some additional off-camera testing, these are the final rankings, specifically for portable projector use, but I think that the BENQ GV50 would move up a few ranks if you were specifically buying a projector for watching movies in a dark room, since it was the most color accurate and it did the least amount of gamma manipulation. However, one important thing that I need to mention is that all of these side-by-sides were done with the projectors plugged into their AC adapters, and for some of them the performance on battery is substantially lower. And when running on batteries, the dimmest projector was the JMGO PicoPlay, which to be fair had the same low brightness on AC power as well. The XGIMI MOGO 4 and MOGO 4 laser lost just a fraction of their brightness when using their internal batteries. The BENQ GV50 drops down to around 340 lumens when you unplug it from power, while the Epson Life Studio Plus loses over half of its brightness when it's powered by USB-C. The TCL PlayCube loses just a small fraction of its brightness on battery, and impressively both the Nebula Mars 3 and Nexigo Nova Mini can output more than 800 lumens on their battery, which is nearly twice as much as the next brightest in the group. As for runtime, 4 of the projectors were around 2 hours of playback at their highest usable brightness. The Wemax S5 ran for 10 minutes less than that on the Anker battery bank. Then there was a group around 90 minutes total, and the Dangbei Frito had the lowest battery life at just over an hour of playback. But don't forget that these were all at different brightness levels. And for the brighter projectors, if you're willing to sacrifice some brightness, you can turn down their light source to get some extra playback time. And one last really interesting thing to me about battery life, the Epson Life Studio Flex Plus and Nexigo Nova Mini both ran for just over 90 minutes on the same Anker 737 power bank. But the Nexigo did it with a peak brightness of 850 lumens, while the Epson used the same amount of power to output half as much brightness. And that's because the Nexigo's dynamic laser dimming also significantly reduces the power consumption when it dims. So instead of pulling a nearly constant 48 watts from the power bank like the Epson did, the Nexigo would constantly bounce anywhere between 20 and 60 watts, depending on the brightness of the scene, which significantly improves its efficiency in addition to increasing its contrast and lowering its black floor. And I would love to see dynamic dimming become a standard in portable projectors in the future. Next, I tested out their fan noise, which is important since you're far more likely to have these positioned close to you, like on a nightstand or a coffee table. And starting out with the quietest projectors, the 2 XGIMI projectors and the Nebula Mars 3 were below the noise floor of my room, and even with a microphone 6 inches from the back of the projector and the audio boosted, the most prevalent sound is the slight buzz of the DLP chip rather than the fans. Next are the projectors that were slightly above the noise floor of the room, but would still be perfectly fine to have next to you on a nightstand. Then we've got the TCL PlayCube and BENQ GV50, which aren't loud by any means, but you will definitely notice their fan noise when there's no other audio playing. And last, the Epson Life Studio Flex Plus was the loudest in the video, but its lower pitch noise might make it slightly more tolerable. Speakers are also much more important for portable projectors, so I evaluated both their maximum volume and their sound quality using a clip from Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, and the Nebula Mars 3 was both the loudest with an average volume of 83.6 decibels and the highest quality with good bass response and a nice flat mid-range that helps with vocal clarity.
Claude, I hope you fix that surge. T-5, R2.
The BENQ GV50 was the next loudest at 81.8 decibels average, but compared to the Nebula, you can see that the bass doesn't have as much presence and the mid-range trails off earlier, which could lead to some loss in vocal clarity.
Claude, I hope you fix that surge. T-5, R2.
The TCL Playcube was slightly quieter than that at 81.5 decibels average, but the bass and mid-range were much more balanced than the GV50, and overall the sound profile was much more similar to the Nebula.
Claude, I hope you fix that surge.
T-minus
5. R2.
The Wemax S5 was loud but relatively terrible and focused almost entirely on the low mid-range.
Claude, I hope you fix that surge. T-minus 5. R2.
The Epson was slightly quiet overall with 80.2 decibels average, but the sound quality was excellent and the frequency response was the most consistent, with less punchy bass than the Nebula, but no underrepresented frequencies.
Claude, I hope you fix that surge. T-minus 5. R2.
The Dangbei, JMGO, XGIMI Mogo 4, and Mogo 4 Laser were all usable, but completely lacked any bass frequencies below 120 Hz, which is not the most enjoyable experience. And the Nexigo had the worst built-in speakers that were not only pretty quiet with an average of 77 decibels, but they also had a frequency response with random peaks and valleys all over the place, leading to a consistently uneven and hollow sound.
Claude, I hope you fix that surge. T-minus 5. R2.
Aiming, automatic Keystone, and automatic focus are another thing that I don't really even test on home theater projectors, but they do get used a lot on these portable projectors. And the Epson, Dangbei, both XGIMIs, and BENQ all have built-in stands that allow them to be pointed straight up for ceiling projection, and even a few degrees down if you've got them on a higher shelf. The TCL Playcube and JMGO PicoPlay have their own unique twist-style aiming system that gives them almost as much flexibility as the projectors with stands. However, when it's pointed straight up towards the ceiling, the TCL's power cord gets in the way, and that's probably for the best anyways, because that's also where the main ventilation port is. And while the JMGO has a similar design, the cylindrical shape stops the air vents from getting blocked, and the 90-degree USB-C power cable can still be plugged in when it's pointed directly towards the ceiling, but none of the other ports are usable in that position. The Wemax S5 and Nexigo Nova Mini are more slab-style projectors, and while the Nexigo does have a small kickstand, both of them are much easier to aim when combined with an add-on gimbal stand. And the least aimable of all these projectors is the Nebula Mars 3, which is limited to just its small kickstand and isn't really fit for ceiling projection. I also tested the effectiveness of each projector's auto Keystone system, and the Epson stood out as the best, with both real-time Keystone correction and an awesome move and zoom function that basically shows the true outline of the screen and how you can adjust the zoom and position to fit within that window. The TCL Playcube also does the automatic real-time correction, but it doesn't have the same move and zoom menu as the Epson. And the JMGO PicoFlix, XGIMI Mogo 4, and XGIMI Mogo 4 Laser have a slightly slower correction process that still doesn't disrupt your viewing, while the rest of the projectors use a calibration screen to do their Keystone corrections, but they all still work. If you want to play video games on your projector, I also measured the input lag, which is the time that it takes for you to see an action on screen after pressing a button on the controller. And in general, input lag numbers under 20 milliseconds are excellent for gaming. Between 20 and 50 milliseconds is fine for casual gaming. Between 50 and 100 milliseconds can start to feel a little bit strange, and input lag numbers over 100 milliseconds just won't work for gaming. And none of these projectors came in under 20 milliseconds, but most were between 20 and 30 milliseconds, with only the TCL Playcube coming in at 72.7 milliseconds despite having a gaming mode, and the Wemax S5 can only muster 110.3 milliseconds, which pretty much rules it out for gaming. In addition to testing for their lowest input lag, which only happens in gaming mode with no Keystone corrections, I also tested them with Keystone on, and I was extremely impressed to see that the Epson Life Studio Flex Plus maintained 22.3 milliseconds even with Keystone enabled, which is the best Keystone input lag performance that I've ever measured. I also tested the performance and compatibility of their built-in operating systems, and with the exception of the Wemax S5, which uses the NetRange App Store, and the Nebula Mars 3, which is still using Android TV, the rest of the projectors are using the newer Google TV, which not only ensures that they have compatibility with all your favorite streaming apps, but they should also continue to receive updates from Google for at least the next 5 years or so. So it's conclusion time, and we need to decide if any of these portable projectors are worth buying. And my problem with portable projectors in general is that even though their overall price might seem low, none of them are competitive with non-portable projectors from a lumens per dollar standpoint. However, if you have your heart set on something that's small that you can throw in a backpack, the TCL PlayCube is the only one that I would call a complete package. It's got decent brightness, good speakers, a useful aiming system, and it lasts about an hour and a half on maximum brightness using just its built-in battery. And overall, to me, the PlayCube just feels sturdy and well built. If you don't mind something that's bigger and heavier and you're looking for something rugged to take with you while you travel or bring into the backyard, the Nebula Mars 3 is going to get my recommendation for the third year in a row because it's got a huge built-in battery, great speakers, and it's twice as bright as the TCL PlayCube with 2 full hours of playback on that built-in battery. It's also a great Bluetooth speaker, and I've been bringing the Nebula Mars 3 on my camping trips for the last 2 years, and I will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. However, strictly for use on a bedside table to project onto a wall or a ceiling, which I think is what most people have in mind with these type of projectors, I am not ready to give any of these my full recommendation yet. The Epson Life Studio Flex Plus seems the most fit for that use case, and it had good brightness, decent picture quality, good speakers, an easy to use aiming system, and impressively low input lag when using Keystone. But the thing that qualifies it to be in this video, which is its ability to be powered by USB-C, was extremely disappointing, since it loses over half of its brightness when it's powered by anything other than its built-in adapter. And ultimately, the Life Studio Flex Plus is less of a portable projector and more of a mini projector, like the JMGO N1S 4K and Hisense M2 Pro. So I will also be including the Epson in my November 7th video with other sub $1,500 projectors to see if it can compete. The Nexigo Nova Mini was bright for a portable projector, it had good contrast for a portable projector, and it had the best picture quality of these portable projectors. And it's currently on sale for $599, which is a reasonable price for this level of performance. But while I appreciate that it maintained 100% of its brightness on battery, and that its dynamic dimming system made it considerably more efficient, the speakers on this thing are pretty bad, which seems like a big miss for a truly portable system. And to me, it seems like the Nova Mini would be better suited for a semi-permanent setup with a separate speaker system, which actually, based on Nexigo's marketing, might have been its intended use case anyways. And other than used and discontinued projectors, the Nexigo Nova Mini is probably the best projector performance that you can currently get around that $600 price point. As always, there are no sponsored reviews on this channel, but I do have links to all the projectors down in the description, and as always, I appreciate when you use those links, since as an Amazon affiliate, I do earn a small commission on the sale at no cost to you. I'd also like to thank all of my awesome patrons over at Patreon for their continued support of my channel, and if you're interested in supporting my channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching the Hookup.